The wedding reception was meant to be a celebration, but everything turned into chaos when my mother-in-law, Sylvia, discovered that I was pregnant before the marriage. I could see her eyes narrow, her expression turning icy as she slowly rose from her seat. Suddenly, in a flash of rage, she marched over to me, and in front of all our guests, she didn't just raise her voice. She grabbed the neckline of my dress and, with a swift motion, tore it apart. Gasps filled the room, the murmurs of shock spreading like wildfire. I stood there, frozen, humiliated beyond words, as the sound of fabric ripping echoed around us. In that moment, everyone expected my husband to step in, to defend me, to show that I belonged to his family despite his mother's wrath. But he didn't. He stood there, looking at me, his face devoid of any emotion. Not a word of support, not a gesture of reassurance. I was left utterly alone, shamed and exposed before a room full of people. Even his father did nothing, just watched silently as if he were merely a spectator. But no one knew what would happen the next day. A storm was coming, and I was ready to fight. My name is Hannah, and I want to tell you my story. It's a story filled with heartbreak and betrayal, but also hope and finding the strength I never knew I had. Growing up wasn't easy for me. I was raised by my grandparents, who took me in after my parents passed away. They did the best they could, but we never had much. I learned early on that life wasn't fair and that I had to fight for everything I wanted. I focused on my studies, determined to build a life for myself. Instead of becoming an accountant like I had once dreamed, I ended up pursuing a career as a software developer, hoping that the field would give me the financial security I longed for. By my late 20s, I had finally landed a good job at a tech firm in a small town in Ohio, thinking that I was on my way to building a stable future. That's when I met Robert Hastings, a man who seemed like everything I had ever hoped for. He was handsome, confident, and came from a well-to-do family that owned several businesses. Our romance was fast and passionate, and it wasn't long before I found myself swept off my feet, believing I had finally found a place where I belonged. Everything changed when I discovered I was pregnant. I was terrified yet excited and thought Robert would feel the same. I still remember the day I told him. We were sitting in my small apartment, and I could barely get the words out. "Robert, I have something important to tell you. I'm pregnant." His reaction wasn't the joy I had hoped for. Instead, his face turned pale, and he began pacing the room. "How could this happen? I'm not ready to be a father," he shouted, his voice filled with panic. My heart sank, but I kept my composure, trying to reassure him. "We can figure it out together," I said softly. "We can plan a future." After a long silence, he finally calmed down and, to my relief, promised to marry me. But that was before Sylvia, his mother, found out. Sylvia Hastings was a woman used to getting her way. She ran their family like a business, cold, calculated, and ruthless. When she discovered I was pregnant, she flew into a rage. I will never forget the way she looked at me the first time she confronted Robert about me. "She's a nobody," Sylvia spat, her words dripping with disdain. "You can't marry her. Think about our family's reputation." Despite Robert's attempts to calm her, Sylvia made it clear that I would never be welcome. But Robert, being the charmer he was, assured me that everything would be okay and that we would go ahead with the wedding. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs. The date of the wedding arrived, and instead of being a joyous occasion, it felt like I was marching into battle. The wedding ceremony went smoothly enough, but at the reception, the truth came out. As we stood there greeting our guests, Sylvia's icy gaze fell on me. I barely had time to react before she stepped forward and tore my dress apart, shouting, "You think you can trap my son with this baby? You will never be part of this family." The silence that followed was deafening. Guests stared, horrified, as I tried to hold the shredded fabric together, my cheeks burning with shame. But the worst part wasn't Sylvia's outburst. It was Robert's silence, his unwillingness to stand up for me. He just looked away, as if I were nothing but a stranger. After the wedding, I moved into the Hastings estate, a sprawling mansion that felt more like a prison than a home. Robert's demeanor changed almost overnight. He became distant, hiding behind the pressures of his family's expectations. Sylvia's cruelty only intensified. She belittled me at every turn, calling me a gold digger and questioning the paternity of my child. "Maybe you've been lying about this baby all along," she would hiss, her voice like venom. Robert deserves better. Each day, I felt more isolated. But I stayed, believing that I could make this work, that somehow Robert would change. It wasn't until I gave birth to my son Jacob that I realized how trapped I truly was. Holding Jacob in my arms, I knew I had to find a way out. That's when Mark and Laura, two friends I met at a local community group, entered my life. Mark was a kind-hearted man in his early 40s with a limp from an old injury, and Laura, his sister, was a nurse's aide. They became my lifeline, offering me support when I had none. "Hannah, you're stronger than you think," Mark would say whenever I felt overwhelmed. "You can build your own family. You don't need to rely on them." Their words gave me hope, and I began to imagine a life where I wasn't under Sylvia's thumb. But just when I thought I could start to rebuild, Sylvia escalated her attacks. One evening, I overheard her telling Robert, "You need to put your foot down, or you'll lose everything. She'll take this baby and ruin your life." Robert's reply stunned me. "I don't know what to do, Mom. She's his mother. What am I supposed to do?" I knew then that I had to protect Jacob. If I didn't act, Sylvia would take everything from me. With Mark and Laura's help, I started gathering evidence, documenting every insult, every threat, every attempt to undermine my role as a mother. When the day of the custody hearing came, I was terrified. Sylvia, dressed impeccably, looked at me as if she'd already won. But I stood my ground, presenting my case with the strength I had fought so hard to find. When the judge announced his decision, granting me full custody of Jacob, I felt the chains finally break. "This isn't over, Hannah," Sylvia snarled as we left the courtroom. "Maybe not," I replied, holding my son close, "but I will always fight for him." In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I found a small house, filled it with laughter and love, and watched as Jacob grew stronger every day. With Mark and Laura by my side, I created a new family, one built on support and trust. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving, and for the first time, I felt truly free. Sylvia may have tried to destroy me, but she underestimated one thing: I'm a fighter, and I will always protect what's mine. But Sylvia's threats were far from empty. Even though I won custody of Jacob, I knew she wouldn't let me live in peace. For weeks, there were rumors and whispers, people telling me that she was looking for ways to undermine the court's decision. "She's not going to give up," Mark warned me one day over coffee. His brow was furrowed, and I could see the worry etched across his face. "You need to stay vigilant." "I know," I murmured, glancing down at Jacob, who was playing quietly beside me. The thought of losing him sent a chill down my spine. I tightened my grip on my coffee cup, determined not to let fear take over. "I'm ready for whatever she throws at me." I thought I was prepared, but then Sylvia made her next move. One evening, as I was putting Jacob to bed, there was a loud knock on the door. I cautiously opened it, only to find two uniformed officers standing on my porch. "Mom, we need to talk," one of them said in a serious tone. "We received a report that you're unfit to care for your son." My heart plummeted. "What? That's a lie. Who would?" But I stopped mid-sentence. Of course, it was Sylvia. This was her doing, her way of trying to take Jacob from me by any means necessary. "Ma'am, we're going to need to look around," the officer said gently, but I could see the suspicion in his eyes. I knew what Sylvia was trying to do, paint me as some sort of unstable, negligent mother, and if I wasn't careful, she could win. "Go ahead," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You won't find anything." They moved through the house, checking every room while I stood there, my stomach in knots. When they were done, the officer nodded. "Everything seems fine here, ma'am, but I suggest you be cautious. False reports like this can sometimes escalate." I nodded, but inside, I was fuming. Sylvia had crossed a line, and I knew that if I didn't take action, she would keep pushing until she found a way to destroy me. I needed to find a permanent solution, something that would protect Jacob and put an end to her interference once and for all. The very next day, I called Mark and Laura. "We need to talk," I said urgently. They came over right away, and we sat around my tiny kitchen table, strategizing. "She's not going to stop," I told them. "I need to find a way to get her out of our lives for good." Laura's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we fight fire with fire." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "We gather evidence on her," Mark said slowly. "She's been playing dirty, trying to paint you as an unfit mother." "But what if we could show the court who she really is? Prove that she's unfit to be anywhere near Jacob." It was a risky move, but I knew it was my only option. Over the next few weeks, we gathered everything we could: recordings of her phone calls, videos of her erratic behavior, even testimonies from former employees who had seen her lose her temper in dangerous ways. Slowly, we built a case against her. The day we presented it to the judge, Sylvia looked furious. "You think you can turn my own tactics against me?" she hissed, her eyes blazing with rage. "This isn't about tactics, Sylvia," I said calmly, holding my head high. "This is about protecting my son from a dangerous influence." The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, and by the time he reached his decision, I could barely breathe. Based on the evidence provided, he began, his voice firm. "I am issuing a restraining order against Sylvia Hastings, effective immediately. She is to have no contact with the child, Jacob Hastings, or his mother, Hannah Porter." I almost collapsed in relief. The battle was finally over. Sylvia let out a furious shriek as the gavel came down, but I didn't care. I had won. Jacob was safe. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. I found a new job in a different town, hoping to build a fresh start for me and Jacob, far away from Sylvia's reach. Mark and Laura helped me move, their support unwavering as always. One sunny afternoon, as I watched Jacob play in our new backyard, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Sylvia had tried to tear me down, but I was still standing, stronger than ever. I had faced her darkness and come out the other side, not just as a survivor, but as a warrior. Mark and Laura were there too, sitting with me on the porch, laughing and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. They had become my chosen family, the people I could count on through thick and thin. We might not share blood, but we shared something deeper: loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond that comes from facing adversity together. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the yard, I turned to Mark. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You didn't need me, Hannah," he replied gently. "You had the strength all along. I just reminded you of it." Tears filled my eyes, but they were tears of joy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had truly found my place in the world. I wasn't just a mother struggling to survive. I was a woman who had fought for her family and won. Sylvia may have lost the battle, but she taught me something important: that I could face the worst and still come out standing. I would always carry the scars of this experience, but I would wear them proudly. They were proof that I was unbreakable. I looked down at Jacob, who was giggling as he chased a butterfly around the yard. "We're going to be okay, baby," I whispered softly. "We're going to be more than okay." Because no matter what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I was finally free to build the life I had always dreamed of, for myself and for my son. We had faced the storm, and now, at last, the skies were clear. Together, we would forge a new path, one filled with love, strength, and the promise of brighter days ahead. In the months following the court ruling, life gradually fell into a peaceful rhythm. I found a small house in a quiet neighborhood, far removed from the chaos of the Hastings estate. Each morning, I watched Jacob grow stronger, his laughter filling our home with warmth. I started working remotely, developing software for a small firm, and the simple joys of our new life, like Jacob's giggles as he chased after butterflies in the backyard, became my source of strength. Mark and Laura remained constants in my life, visiting often to check in and lend a helping hand. They had become the family I always longed for, proving that love and loyalty are not always bound by blood. As I sat on the porch one evening, holding Jacob close, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I was no longer surviving, I was thriving. I had fought for my son, for our future, and against all odds we had won. The scars of the past still lingered, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as reminders of the strength I had found within myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free and hopeful about the future, ready to embrace whatever came next.